Hey there. Let's talk about lo-fi. More importantly, let's talk about how to take what would normally be a super clean sample, like either it be guitar or piano or anything you want, and then make it sound like it came off of a cassette deck in 1960 something Ford Mustang, whatever. So the point being is, let's take something that's super pristine and then let's make it into something that sounds really old. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. If you're using a DAW, which I am not, but if you are, you can use plugins. So there's XLN Audio makes a plugin called the RC10, I believe. And that stands for Retro Color. And it's kind of like a kind of warbly, wow and fluttery type tape deck type plugin. And it's pretty good, actually. I use it quite a bit. I don't like using DAWs a whole lot, so I try and replicate that stuff outside of DAWs if I can. Audio Thing makes a plugin called Reels. It does pretty much the same thing. In the pedal world, I come from a guitar background, so in the pedal world, there's quite a few options there as well. Fairfield Circuitry makes a pedal called the Shallow Water, which is super awesome at making things sound watery and kind of super lo-fi, and I actually like it a lot. Chase Bliss Audio makes a pedal called Generation Loss. In fact, they're coming out with a Mark II version of that in the next couple of months, which should be really good. And then Carolina Guitar Company makes a chorus/vibrato pedal called the Somersault, which you can kind of get the same type of warbly sounds from. So lots of options there in the pedal world. But the cool thing about the Octatrack is you actually don't need any of that. You don't need plugins, don't need pedals. You can do it all within the Octatrack. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to do that. First thing you need to do is start with a sample. All right. And I prefer samples that are written in minor keys just because they're a little bit more melancholy, add a little bit more of a dramatic feel to it. It can totally be done in anything written in a major key. But if the vibe you're going for is lo-fi, chill type stuff, then minor keys tend to work a little bit better. But to each his own. So here's our track, and here's our sample. All right, so I got that off of Splice. Nothing fancy there, just a couple of chords on piano. Sounds super clean. Nothing's wrong with it yet. There's three concepts in old technology like tape decks and vinyl record players that we need to understand in order to make stuff sound like it's from that era. Number one is called WOW. Number two is called Flutter. And the third one is noise. All right. So WOW and Flutter kind of go hand in hand. In fact, in a lot of plugins and pedals, you'll see WOW knobs and Flutter knobs. WOW is the slow kind of pitch shifting of a piece when it goes slightly out of tune and then comes slightly back in tune. Usually that's caused by either, like on a tape deck, that would be like tape that's maybe stretched a little bit too thin, or maybe being pulled too hard. It's old, it's grimy. So WOW can be that. The other thing I read about this the other day, when they print vinyl records, if they don't drill the hole exactly precisely in the middle, if it's off by like a millimeter, it actually causes WOW, like that whoa, 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 out of tune type effect, because of the fact that the needle is kind of stretching and being pulled in different directions, which is kind of cool. Never really thought about that way. I always thought of that as like a tape thing. So Flutter is a little bit more, it's definitely faster, and it's something that happens pretty quick, and it's more drastic. All right, you hear it, and it's usually like, on a tape reel, it might be some dirt gunked up on the playhead, or it might be a crinkle in the tape as it's going past the playhead. It could be a couple different things, but it's usually caused by some sort of a defect. And it's usually random, happens at various times. It's not rhythmic. Like WOW is very rhythmic. It happens in cycles. Flutter is usually just something that happens when something kind of triggers it. And we'll create that effect as well. And then the last one is noise. Noise is, in the tape world, it's either like a low hum or a hiss caused by just the fact that the technology is just not quite as good as what we have today. In the vinyl world, it's that crackle that everybody knows and loves when they hear like vinyl records. It's that kind of warm feeling that vinyl records give to you. So those three elements give us, you know, a typical traditional lo-fi type sound. So that's what we're going for today with this piano clip. All right, so first things first. I've got my clip. It's set up on track 4 on the Octatrack. You can see it right there. All my settings are pretty much normal. I always do add an amp envelope. You know, I pretty much keep it to the length of the clip, and I get rid of the attack and the release just so that the clip is playing exactly when it's supposed to be playing, and it can't loop. It can't go, you know, further than it's supposed to. Volume set straight up. I'm going to go to the LFO, and there's 3 LFOs that I have to use here. First LFO, I'm going to apply that WOW effect, which is taking the pitch and slightly modifying it. So we're going to keep the parameter source set to pitch. All right. We are going to keep the wave at triangle. I'm going to change the mult to 2x because I want it a little bit faster. I'm going to keep the trigger free running, so it's always running in the background and looping. The speed, I think the default speed on the Octa is 32. That's a little bit too fast for me, so I'm going to slow it a little bit down. And the thing is, 32 actually keeps the cycle for the most part in rhythm with the track. I don't want that. I want it to kind of, you know, do its thing at a different speed. So let's just make that like 24. And a lot of these settings are going to be like, you know, to taste. So so let's play the clip. I have the depth set at 0, so you're not hearing anything. I'm going to turn the depth way up so you can hear the effect. So you hear it go way out of tune and then come back and then go way under tune. All right, so we don't want that, obviously. We want it super subtle. So we're actually going to set the depth to 1. I've found that anything more than 1 tends to take it too far out of tune. So if you have other clips that are playing or other instruments that are playing in key with this track, they're not going to sound good because all of a sudden they're out of key. So you can kind of hear it go a little bit in and out of tune. All right, that's LFO 1. LFO 2, we're going to take, that's going to be our flutter trigger. All right, actually that's going to be our flutter effect. So again, we want it to happen to the pitch, so I'm going to leave that. The wave I need to change though, because that wave I want it to be super quick, and the best wave to use for that is going to be that exponential wave there, because it goes up really quick and then it comes back down. All right, we are going to change, I want this to be super fast, so I'm going to change the multiplier to like 16. All right, I'm going to keep it free running. I want it to always be running in the background so that when I trigger it, it's at random places. All right, and let's look at the speed. The speed is set to 32. I think I want it a little bit offbeat as well, but I'm going to speed it up like 44 or something like that. So it's not in rhythm with the track. And then you got the 16x multiplier, so it'll never be in rhythm with the track, but it's super fast. And then the depth, believe it or not, I'm going to leave that at 0. The reason why I'm going to leave that at 0, I'm going to actually trigger the depth somewhere else. I'm going to use another LFO to trigger that because I don't want this always running. I want it to happen at seemingly random times. All right, so that's LFO 2. Now let's go down to LFO 3. LFO 3 is going to be my flutter trigger, so it's going to trigger the LFO effect. So let's change the parameter to LFO 2's depth, which I believe is called LFO depth 2. There it is. All right. I also want this to be a fast trigger when it happens, so we're going to use that same wave. The waveform is the exponential one. I'm going to keep the mult at 1. I just want it to happen at whatever speed I set. The trigger is going to be free floating again, or free running. And then the speed, we're going to slow it down. We're going to set it to like 20. I don't want it to happen a lot. I want it to happen every so often. And then the depth, we're going to change to like 10. And again, you can mess with these and get the settings that you want. I'm going a little bit overboard here so that the effect is super noticeable on the video, but subtlety is your best friend here. You don't want to overdo it. Typically, what you're going to hear is something that's not quite as subtle, but again, I'm just trying to demonstrate the effect. Take the settings down a notch when you're doing it in your actual songs. So LFO 3 is now triggering LFO2 every so often. It's running at a speed of about 20, which is pretty slow. So it's going to probably be like every couple of loops. And the cool thing about it is that when LFO3 triggers LFO2, LFO2 is also that exponential wave. It may catch it at the beginning of the wave. It may catch it in the middle. It may catch it at the end. If it catches it at the end, you're hardly going to notice it. If it catches it at the beginning, it's going to be super noticeable. And if it catches it at the middle, it's going to be kind of like a little warble as opposed to a big one. All right. So that adds to the total randomness of this. So we've got those 3 LFOs set. Let's go ahead and play our clip now and see what it sounds like. Hear that little warble there? Pretty cool. So far, so good. The other thing I like to do, so we've got those kind of 3. We've got the WOW, we've got the Flutter. We haven't added the noise yet. So I have a track 5 set up. I'm going to turn it on. And what I did was I found a sample that is basically just vinyl noise. And I'll play just that for you so you can hear it. And I'm going to turn it up a little bit so you can actually hear what it's doing. Just a little bit of crackle. All right, so we don't even want that to be hardly noticeable. So we're going to play both tracks, and I'm going to lower that vinyl so that it's just kind of in the background. All right, that sounds decent to me. It's not overwhelming, but it's kind of there, and it gives that little effect. All right, if you're going for the tape cassette type of noise, you can get a cassette noise sample, or you can take a compressor and crank the hell out of it on a blank track and see if you can get some noise that way. There's probably multiple ways that you can do it. By the way, this is one of probably many ways you can create lo-fi type sounds on samples. So just keep that in mind. All right. So now we've got the LFO set, we've got the sample set, we've got our noise. Let's go ahead and make it just a tad bit better. So what I'd like to do is go here, go to my first effects track, and let's add some chorus and maybe crank up the taps a little bit to like 4 or 5. All right, and then let's play that. I'm gonna crank up the mix. This is gonna fatten it up pretty nicely. Maybe speed it up just a tad. Add some more depth. All right, so this is super pronounced. I probably, if I was using this in a track, I would not go this heavy on the lo-fi effects, but you get the point. When it's super subtle, sometimes it's not as noticeable, but I want it to be noticeable here. So there's my chorus. I'm gonna use my last effect. I love this lo-fi effect that the Octatrack has. I use it on almost every track. A couple of reasons. The distortion on it is amazing for dirtying stuff up. So we're going to crank the distortion. Keep in mind when you crank the distortion, you're also increasing the volume. So you have to go to the amp and you have to lower it a little bit to kind of counteract that volume increase. Not a big fan of the sample rate reduction and the bit rate reduction, but if you want to get noise, that's another way to do it, is to add some sample rate reduction to it just before it starts to sound super choppy and digital. The other thing I like to do is, we mess with the pitch, but we haven't really messed with the amplitude, the volume of the track, of the sound. So we can do that with the amplitude modulation frequency, which determines how fast the modulation happens, and then the depth, which determines how deep it goes and how much you actually hear. All right, we can make this super noticeable by making it really deep. Alright, that's obviously overkill, so we're going to dial that way back. got a pretty decent lo-fi sound on what used to be a super clean, super pristine piano piece in D sharp minor. So now let's add some other tracks to it. I've got some effects going on here, some scratches. It's kind of nice. Some drums. Maybe throw the Syntec in there with some hi-hats or some additional bits. And there you have it. Super easy way to take something clean, make it old, throw it into a track, and maybe come up with some lo-fi, chill type sounds. As always, if you have any questions, don't be afraid to hit me up. Post a question in the comment, like, subscribe so YouTube knows I'm here. And I'm also on Facebook in the Elektronauts group, and I'm usually on the Reddits pretty often. So see me on there, say hi. Thanks for watching. Keep making music. Peace.